Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Perthing and Ross Local Review Body of the 12th of October. I apologise for the late start, but the IT gremlins struck, but all IT issues have now been resolved, I sincerely hope. So, my name is Councillor Lewis Simpson. I'm the convener of the local review body, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, serial volunteers, Councillor Ian James and Councillor Bob Braun. I'm very grateful to them volunteering to assist this morning. I'm also joined by Mr. David Harrison, who is the planning advisor to the local review body. He is not part of the planning department and has had no previous involvement with any of the applications on the agenda today. We're also joined by Mr. Jeff Fogg, who is the legal advisor to the local review body, and by Mr. Danny Williams of Committee Services. Declarations of interest. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest by members on the item on the agenda today? I have none. Councillor Braun?
Nothing at all, convener.
Councillor James?
And nothing for me either, convener.
That's fine, thanks. So if we can note the minute of the meeting of 14th September, is that all right, colleagues?
Agreed.
That's fine, thank you very much. So we will now move to the first and only item for review today. It's a planning application for alterations and extension to a dwelling house, the Granary, 2 Arley Steadings, Milnathort. Mr. Harrison, can I ask you to introduce this application for review?
Thank you, convener. Yes, as you say, this is a detailed planning application for the alteration and extension of a dwelling house at the Granary, Arlarley Steading, Milnathort by Kinross. The application concerns the replacement and enlargement of an existing conservatory to form a sunroom. And I'll just take you through the photographs now, but you might like to page 17 onwards, which provide you with the location plan and site plans and drawings of the extension. The general sequence of the photographs will be the Granary building itself, then the existing extension and its garden grounds, and then the adjoining property. So if I just go to the first photograph now, this is us approaching the Granary at the entrance, looking in a southerly direction. And as you can see, there's a certain amount of hedging and vegetation enclosing the garden ground on that, shall we say, the northern side of the property. So if we move on from there into the next photograph, we step into the garden ground. This is the north elevation as indicated there, and as you can see, there's an extension providing sort of a porch entry to that side of the building. Just to orientate you slightly, the conservatory, position of the conservatory is on the gable of the building you see stretching out there in the photograph. So if we move on from that photograph to the next photograph, this takes us to that gable end. That's the western end. And again, as you can see, there's a certain amount of vegetation enclosing the conservatory from that position within the garden ground. So even the existing conservatory is not actually visible. So if we move to the next photograph, we're just picking up the conservatory as we look down that gable. And the hedge you see beyond the conservatory there is on that, so we see, southern boundary. So moving on again, in that photograph we move round. This is us now looking directly at that gable, and of course the existing conservatory with the 3 windows under an arch above that. That of course is part of the limitation of, for example, there isn't really an option to put a pitched roofed extension in the building because of those upper windows at the present. So as I say, the garden ground is enclosed by the hedge on the right hand side of the photograph you see, and you can see the nature of the extension itself. There will be slightly larger details of the extension that's there at present, and just to be clear, the extension has listed building consent in the past, which was, shall we say, secured by a previous owner. So if we move on from that photograph, we just swing round slightly to the left, so you're just catching the corner of the conservatory as it stands at the moment in the gable, and you can see the garden ground. And as you can see, this is part of a group of buildings which formed the steading before, so you might just be able to make out the roof of an adjoining building on the extreme left-hand side of the photograph there. So again, if we swing slightly to the left of that photograph, we pick up the rest of the garden ground associated with the conservatory. Again, you can see the extent to which it's enclosed by high hedges at present, and of course trees. And beyond that, out with the application site, we have the adjoining shed, which is referred to in the papers, which has been extended in the past. So we have a steading, should we say, traditional group of steading buildings here, but also some modern buildings immediately adjoining it. So if we move on from that photograph to the next photograph, we just go back to the conservatory itself, just to give you a little bit more of the detail there. That's the west gable again, and then in the next photograph, it gives you a detail of the base course, which is there at present. The intention is to replace that with a rendered base course. And then if we go to the next photograph, we see the detail of the existing windows. And then if we go to the next photograph, we see the roof. And as you can see in this particular instance, the guttering which is referred to in the down rainwater goods are in plastic as things stand at present, although the aspiration with the extension is of course to go for a more traditional material with painted aluminium rainwater goods. So if we move on from there to the next photograph, we step out with the application site. This is the hedge, of course, enclosing that western boundary of the application site, just to give you an indication the extent to which is that the conservatory would or would not be seen, or I should maybe say the sunroom would or wouldn't be seen from the adjoining track. And then if we move to the next photograph, just to give you an indication of some of the ancillary, or should say adjoining steading buildings which have also been converted into housing. That's on the opposite side of the southern boundary of the application site, to give an indication of that. So if we move to the last photograph, I'll just leave you with that general photograph showing the western elevation and the existing sunroom. So if I turn now in summary to the applicant's case, the existing conservatory is considered to be in poor condition. During the application, the Conservation Planning Officer expressed concern regarding the enlargement of the existing conservatory, the use of projecting eaves, unlike the host building, and the need for the new build to be of high quality, using natural materials and avoiding materials such as UPVC rainwater goods and timber effect cladding. In response, the proposal was subsequently revised to reduce the eaves projection, replace the original cladding with treated natural timber cladding, and to replace the UPVC rainwater goods with black painted aluminium. The proposed extension is not seen as being significantly larger than the existing conservatory. The roof line is lower than the existing conservatory, which reduces its visual effect on the listed building. The substantial extension to the neighbouring industrial building, which has been approved by the council, is seen as being out of character with the area and, by comparison to this proposal, detracts from the appearance of the listed building. In conclusion, this low-profile replacement extension is of a simple design and of appropriate materials in keeping with the building and the local vernacular. Turning now in summary to the officer's report of handling, while the principle of extending dwellings is supported, the specific details, possible impacts and context of the site requires to be assessed. The property is part of a steading redevelopment. It is part of a Category C listed building. A conservatory extension has been erected onto the gable of the house, and it is proposed to replace this with a sunroom. The sunroom would increase the footprint. The sunroom would have a footprint of some 4.5 by 4.5 metres. The flat roof would extend so that the eaves would project some 800 millimetres. This projection is seen as a strong, ornate and unsympathetic architectural statement in contrast to the simplicity of the clipped eaves of the house. Concern is also expressed regarding the proposed use of synthetic materials, notably UPVC rainwater goods and fibre cement cladding. The applicant's suggested revisions to replace the materials using painted aluminium rainwater goods and timber cladding would be acceptable. However, the suggested reduction of the eaves overhang from 800 to 600 millimetres was not considered to be satisfactory. This aspect of the design is seen as being incongruous relative to the character of the listed building, even with the suggested reduction. The application was assessed on the basis of the original proposal, which did not include the suggested revisions. In this case, there are no representations. There is neither a request for a site visit nor a hearing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mr. Harrison. Are there any questions for officers on this application for review? Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to clarify the plans we have in our pack, page 20. These are the revised design and revised materials. Am I right? And that the planner has seen these. Am I right?
Yes. No, you are. First of all, you are correct. There has been a little bit of correspondence just to clarify that point. So the drawing you have on page 20 is effectively the same as the original drawing, with the exception of the change of materials which has been referred to, and of course a reduction in the overhang of the projection of the eaves, that is. Right.
Okay. Okay, fine. And the actual site, looking at the photographs, the conservatory now, even this is well shielded from anybody outside the property, I would think. Is that right? Looking at the photographs.
Yeah. Yes, I think hopefully the series of photographs will have indicated that it's set in, shall we say, a mature garden with both high hedges and other planting.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you, Convener. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor James, any questions from you?
No, Convener. Councillor Braun just stole my thunder. Asked pretty much the same as I was going to ask. Convener, whilst speaking to you, can I just clarify, please? I did lose my connection at the beginning of Mr. Harrison's presentation. However, I did see all of the photographs as had already been sent the presentation previously, so I don't consider that I've missed anything of consequence, which would prevent me from being part of the decision-making process today.
Thank you for alerting us to that, Councillor James. Can I just check with you, Mr. Fogg, that is acceptable, or should we get Mr. Harrison to reprise the first bit of his presentation?
No, I think it's unnecessary to ask Mr. Harrison to repeat that, because what he was doing was summarising the information that's already available to Councillor James. He has the applicant's application and the case officer's report of handling. So if he's already familiar with that, he will not have been hindered by the summary, unless there's anything he particularly wishes Mr. Harrison to clarify.
No, I also had the photograph presentation which Mr. Harrison was actually talking to. I'd seen that previously, so I in effect I didn't miss anything other than Mr. Harrison speaking. Sorry, David.
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. I think you can live without that. I think we can be reassured that there was no new information introduced, as Mr. Fogg says. It was simply a summary, and that's fine. I have a couple of questions, Mr. Harrison. I just wondered to what extent it's a material consideration that it's hard to see this particular extension. When I was there, I normally look at sites from afar, but I had to go and actually knock on the front door. There was no one in, and have a look around to see it, because it was impossible really to have a proper look at it from outside without going into the garden. Does that make should we take that into consideration, or is that just how it happens to be? Because you can cut a hedge down, I suppose.
Yeah, that's correct. The hedge could be removed, or planting can be removed. It's always an issue with either existing or proposed landscaping. But to answer your more underlying question, is the, shall we say, the context as far as the garden, the hedge, relevant in this instance? I think that in the introduction I made reference to the fact that the context of any development is, as it were, a material consideration, albeit one which varies very considerably from, shall we say, a development exposed on the top of a hill to something that is so far around the back that nobody other than the owner of the property might even be aware of it. Right. It's just part and parcel of the nature of having to make a broad, shall we say, view on the impact of a proposal.
Thank you for that, Mr. Harrison. I have a further question just regarding how much larger the sunroom is than the existing conservatory. I'm reminded of Councillor Wilson's advice to always have a magnifying glass to hand. I can't quite see on the plans on 19 and 20, but in percentage terms, how much bigger is the proposed sunroom than the existing conservatory? Well,
I might take the opportunity of drawing your attention on page 20, which is of course the proposal. The architect has put a dotted line, as it were, on the ground floor plan, which gives you an indication of the, shall we say, the outline of the existing conservatory, if that assists you.
Yes, I'm just as I look at the shapes are different as well. It just seems to me that it's, because it's absolutely rectangular, the proposed one is going to be perhaps bigger than one might assume.
Well, first of all, it does project further than the existing conservatory in terms of the front of it, as it were. And as you rightly say, it doesn't have chamfered corners, which you can see in the photograph here. It projects out in just a square form. I mean, it is completely square. So it maybe increases the floor area, which, go back to your original question, by approximately maybe about a 1/3 of what we have there.
Right, thanks. And just one other thing, perhaps, is do we have any information as to the purpose of the overhang? Because it seems that the overhang is one of the points of issue, and it was unclear to me what the purpose of the overhang was.
Okay, I think, shall we say, without interpreting too much what the architect was seeking to achieve here, if you can imagine the extension, which has to be of a very shallow pitch or flat roof because of the windows you can see in the photograph here. Yeah. My interpretation would be that the architect is trying to, shall we say, articulate the detail of the building rather than simply having what you might call a slightly boxy extension, by actually creating some interest in a shadow by deliberately adding to that box appearance, as it were, and adding a degree of interest by emphasizing that as a detail to the building, and making it clear that there is, shall we say, an original traditional building with skews and clipped eaves, and this is a departure from that and a contrast to that, which you say he's articulating by creating this overhang to add what he I suspect would feel is giving great clarity between the original and the more contemporary part of the building.
Right, so it's more of an aesthetic thing than actually a requirement, perhaps, for rainwater or sunshine or anything like that.
I think it's a way of dealing with the practical requirement, but I think it's probably principally to, I say, arrive at a design which has got a degree of architectural merit in its own right.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Harrison. I take it, colleagues, you have no further questions after that? No. Right, so members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us, that is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Braun?
No, I'm happy to proceed, convener.
Councillor James?
Likewise, convener.
Right, and I too am happy to proceed. So we will now assess the case and move to debate. So, having considered the applicant's papers, the report of handling, the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan, and all other relevant material planning considerations, I will start things off, if I may. I have to say, colleagues, at first sight here, I was unable to determine what the issue might be until I had been and taken a look. But I think there's always a potential problem when there is a modern extension beside a listed building. And I hear what you say, Mr. Harrison, about the idea beside some of the items to do with it and some of the planning considerations. But I think, and it's a balance as always, I can see why they might want to replace the existing building and make something perhaps more appropriate to their house. But I feel on this occasion, although they have tried very hard to revise certain of the materials, they've revised the rainwater goods, they've revised some of the cladding and so on, I still feel that to my mind, the general look of the proposal and the overhangs in particular jar with me, and I think I would be inclined to support the officer's view, although I would want to, if depending on what we all decide, I might want to tidy up parts of reason 2 for refusal. But I think on balance, I feel that although the applicant has tried to change things to suit, I feel that on this occasion, given that it's a category C listed building, I would have to agree with the officers on this one. Okay, Councillor Braun, may we have your view?
Thank you, convener. I think to some extent you've said something along the lines I was going to start with, as much that with a listed building, it is always difficult to judge an extension of any sorts to it. It's almost impossible to replicate the style of the building. I'm of a mind on this occasion, however, that there is an existing conservatory in place. It is shielded from sight from outside of the garden. And I appreciate the comment that you made that hedges can be cut down and changes can be made, but I think that can be said of any application, and anybody can change things. We can't, I think about the future. We have to assess it as it is, which is it's well shielded from the road and from public view. There is an existing conservatory in place. This is going to be slightly larger. I appreciate that, but we have seen that changes have been made to try and bring it into line with the building. The materials have been changed and the downpipes have been changed to metal aluminium. So my inclination is on this occasion, I feel different to yourself, convener, that I would allow the appeal and overturn the original decision on this case. I think, yes, there is a question about overhang, but of course, to some extent, that is the design that the applicants want. It is their land after all, and I'm conscious of the fact that it's shielded. But I think they've made the effort to try and bring the extension into line in some extent with the building, and so my thoughts are at this stage are that we should allow the appeal and overturn the original decision. So I would go with the appeal on this one, convener. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Braun. Councillor James, may we have your view?
Yep, thanks, convener. And on this occasion, convener, I'm going to go with Councillor Braun. I think the applicants tried very hard to change what the officer needed changing in the first place. They've changed the materials, they've changed the look of it. Yes, it is a little bigger, but if you're replacing something, why not make it practical as well? And at the end of the day, that's what the planning process is for. The fact that there's a flat roof with an overhang, as somebody who was grateful for an overhang on their conservatory to prevent the rain just dripping down the windows, I do get it, and I take Mr. Harrison's points about the design. What's there already, to be honest, I don't think it is very sympathetic with the building anyway, and I don't think a pitched roof you couldn't put in because of the windows above. I think this plan is actually quite good, and given its position and everything else, I'm quite happy to overturn the planner's decision and allow this plan.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor James. Have you anything further to add, Councillor Braun?
No, I'm happy with the points I've made, and I'm happy to overturn the decision and allow the appeal.
That's fine. So that's fine. So, Mr. Fogg, are you content? You have sufficient. It's a 2-1 decision today. Do you need any further articulation of views, or are you happy that you have everything you require?
Convener, I'm quite happy that I have what's required from the statements given by the three this morning. Obviously, whilst it's not relevant to your decision making, the applicant will still have to secure listed building consent for the proposal, and will need to pursue that as a separate appeal process with the Scottish Ministers.
Yes, but as far as the review body is concerned, we have made our decision. It's in some respects a good thing that we don't always all agree with each other. At the last meeting we all did, and it makes you nervous if we're all agreeing. And as I say, there were views. My view was that there was a very fine balance with this particular one. And the applicant will be very pleased, I'm sure. And they have now to get to work with their the other matters that you referred to, Mr. Fogg. But I think with that, I would.
Could I interrupt you just for a moment?
Yes, indeed,
before you close, just really in a point of clarification, you of course had, as it were, the original proposal for an 800mm overhang of the eaves, and then a slight revision to 600mm. And I just wanted to be clear which of the two you were actually deciding to approve.
Good point, Mr. Harrison. I think over to Councillor Braun and Councillor James, just for them to clarify that.
It was a reduced one, 600mm, I think.
And the same goes for me, convener. I was on the assumption that they changed the materials. They'd also changed the 800 to 600. So yeah, that's what I
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. So if you're happy, Mr. Fogg, I will thank you all for your attendance and draw this meeting to a close. Thank you all very much. Thank you.